I asked Professor Joav Toker of the American Graduate School in Paris why these attacks are becoming more common.
Because the battle continues, because there is a much better definition on the part of us all, let us be in the West or beyond the West, in terms of who the enemy is and what types of dangers this enemy represents, right? And there is some significant progress in terms of combating those dangers. The situation today, in comparison to the situation 12 months ago, is significantly better. But there is still a very significant road ahead of us. Let it be in the military sense, although Fallujah has been taken, although there are on the ground clear achievements in the battlefield in Iraq and Syria, there's still a lot of work to do, mainly when it comes to Mosul, the second largest town in Iraq. But I would say that beyond the military aspect, there are political and mental difficulties which do represent and will represent still a very significant challenges to all of us fighting ISIL. In terms of politics, in terms of cooperation of local trenches of population, for example, in Syria and Iraq, and mainly perhaps in the mobilization capabilities of ISIS due to virtual technologies, mechanically and conceptually, usually the work through internet. So this has been identified now by all those who are fighting ISIL, but still has not been put into action. So we do have to catch up with many things before we could really be sure enough in those relatively optimistic anticipations and appreciations that we hear from most of the specialists over the last 6 months or so.
We're seeing an uptick in the extremist attacks globally as ISIL is losing this ground war. Will this intensify, in your opinion, further as ISIL continues to be boxed in?
It may very well be the case. This is usually the classical, so to speak, syndrome. I mean, when you're under pressure on your territorial basis, which is certainly the case in Syria and Iraq, then you try to centrifuge your activities and just hit both in terms of morale, in terms of propaganda, in terms of so-called public image of what you're doing, and then you'd be tempted to try some kind of marginalized effort, so to speak, and excuse me for the term of margins when we're speaking about such a morbid and deadly attacks in Istanbul, in Dhaka, in Baghdad today. But in terms of the overall potentiality of ISIL, this could very well be sort of a compensation because of the relative weakness which had been manifested over the last few months. But still, as the battle fronts are numerous and that the overall ISIL phenomena has been franchised internationally, and you need few individuals sufficiently convinced for their so-called cause to declare themselves adherent of ISIL ideology or so-called ideology for them to be very harmful. So that's why we should be very cautious over too optimistic anticipations.